is the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources with additional responsibility as Minister for Energy. Honorable Samuel Abdullahi Jinapor, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and good evening to your listeners, your cherished listeners.
Good evening to you too. I noticed that in your statement you took steps to underline various issues that your colleague had alleged state capture. So he talks about the parks and gardens lands at cantonment. You have refuted that. He talks about let me just look at the several other issues. The Judicial Service lands, you've spoken about that. So let's take it step by step. Are you saying that everything he has said is untrue, or there's some clarification that has to be done for the prison service land at Roman Ridge, for instance? You talk about that, and several other issues. Parks and gardens land at Bois. In fact, he says that has also been looted. The Du Bois Center, he talks about that one as well. Then you have given a conclusion at the end. So let's talk about step by step. What are your answers specifically to these issues?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to these matters. And I want to just lay an initial premise, which is that my attitude to matters of transactions relating to public lands when they come up for scrutiny is always to welcome them. Because you see, when it comes to the management of the lands and natural resources of our country, it's a collective exercise. It's a collective effort. So myself as a minister, the ministry, my officials, the legislature, parliament, in this case, the Honorable Ablakwa and co, and my colleagues in parliament, the media and all of that, we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that these resources are managed properly and managed within the framework of integrity in a manner that serves the people of Ghana. Because let's face it, these are the properties of the Ghanaian people by the dictates of our national constitution. So when my colleague made those allegations, I said, as I've always done, let us assemble the facts. And what was the allegation? The allegation was that this current government, the Akufo-Addo government, is sold various parcels of public land. And he then concluded that this is all part of the grand scheme of state capture. So I said, let's assemble the facts. And the specific allegations which were made by him, I mean, those that have come to my attention, suggested that the parks and gardens lands have been sold. And when you go into the records, you will see from the 11-page, 59-paragraph statement I have issued that the specific portion of land at the parks and gardens was sold or leased, whichever way you put it, was sold or leased as far back as, just give me a second, please, as far back as 29th November 2016 to a company called One-Tirim Company Limited on 29th November 2016. One-Tirim Company Limited, having bought this land, having acquired this land, then assigned its interest to a private company called Danny Ike Real Estate Developers Company Limited. Well, does that constitute state capture? I'm not going to get into that kind of argument. I'll leave it to the jury out there, and I'll leave it to those who have some level of sophistry in these matters. But was this land sold under President Akufo-Addo, and therefore to arrive at the conclusion that President Akufo-Addo and his government are engaged in state capture by selling public lands to their cronies? That is palpably false. It's not correct. The records are there, and I said the records all out.
So that's on Parks and Gardens, Wa?
On Parks and Gardens. It was sold on 29th November 2016. We all know who was president of this country on 29th November 2016. I'm not going to say it. It was President Mahama who was president.
Okay.
And does that constitute state capture at the time? I don't know. But was it sold under President Akufo-Addo? Probably no. The Judicial Service land, which he says judges have been thrown out, and that has been a matter which has been...
He said they are even in court. They've gone to court to protect the land.
True. That's all of that is true. But my friend, that land was sold as far back as 13 July 2015. It's a simple check. Everybody who knows a bit about...
Repeat the date again, please.
It was sold, a lease was granted to Frames Oil Company Limited as far back as 13 July 2015. I'm very familiar with this transaction. I had to go to the Chief Justice multiple times for meetings on this matter. I've written copy letters, back and forth, correspondence between my office and the Judicial Service on this matter. This land was sold as far back as 13 July 2015 to a company called Frames Oil Company Limited.
2015, 15 or 16?
15.
Okay.
2015, 13 July 2015 was when a 50-year lease was granted to Frames Oil Company Limited. You will find it in the statement that I've just issued. And so, I mean, Du Bois Center, for the records we have at the Lands Commission suggest that there's not been any transaction relating to Du Bois Center. That's the records I have from Lands Commission.
So he said Du Bois Center has been leased for 50 years. You don't have any records?
Well, I don't have any such records. If he's kind enough to furnish me the records, I'll take a look at it. But I deal with records, and the repository of records when it comes to lands in Ghana is the Lands Commission, and all this information, I source them from the Lands Commission. And that's always been my attitude. When these matters come up, the first thing you have to do is assemble the facts. What are the facts? And in many cases, when you assemble the facts, you get shocked like I'm shocked here. When it's been said that lands have been sold under this government, when those lands were sold, when Mr. Honorable Kujuto was a minister.
Very well. So that's Du Bois. So Du Bois Center, that's the answer you have. Let's talk about prison service land at Roman Reach.
Yes, prison service land. The records I have suggest that the transaction was entered into in 2005, way back in 2005. And then you have the Parks and Gardens lands at WA, which transaction took place in 2019, the reason for which have all been stated copiously in the statement that I've issued. But even
I think the last one will be the Parks and Gardens land at Cantonments. What is the status of that?
No, in WA. That one is Parks and Garden lands at WA.
Okay.
That's C.
Okay.
Yeah, that was. I think that was concluded on 27th January 2020. But obviously, the process even began way before 2020.
Okay, there's another one. If you look at paragraph A, the Parks and Gardens land at Cantonments is in your statement. That talks about the DVLA area, the land opposite DVLA.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
You're right. That was concluded on 29th November 2016.
Okay,
so
it's the same as the one in WA?
No, it's different. The one in WA is Parks and Gardens land in WA, which I say was concluded in 2020.
Okay, that's 2020.
2020.
Okay, so that's during your government's era.
Yeah, that's during my government's era.
Okay, so if we were to extrapolate,
it's been set out.
So if we were to extrapolate all the lands that you have been mentioned, apart from the Parks and Gardens land in WA, which your government was in power or is in power as of the time it was leased, every other parcel of land that has been discussed was in the past, going way back to John Kufuor's time. Correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, can you explain the WA one, which would be the one you can respond to because you are in government now?
Well, first of all, not that it matters. This transaction took place before I became a minister. Now, but be that as it may, the point is this. You are never to come to the conclusion that any time public land is leased for private development or to third parties, that transaction is to be frowned upon. Not at all. You have to look at the merits. You have to look at the reason for the release of those lands. I'll give you one classic example. The colonial government and President Nkrumah's government acquired so much land in the past on the premise, for example, that many of these lands which were acquired were in the outskirts of capital cities of our country. And some of these lands were even acquired for agricultural purposes on the presumption that these parts of the capital cities of our country were way out of the city center. Today, urbanization is taking us and made those places the very center of human activity. And therefore, as far back as President J.J. Rawlings' time, the redevelopment policy was brought into being, where lands were to be used for optimal value. So that if you had a bungalow on, say, a 10-acre land in the center of Accra, you want to have an arrangement, a public-private partnership, in a manner that the state will get more bungalows and there will be facelift. There will be facelifting. You can beautify the capital city. So the sale or leasing of public lands in and by itself is not necessarily wrong. It is how it is done. It's the level of transparency, the rationale behind it, the purpose for which it is done, whether it serves the public good. That is what makes it good or bad. So I think it's important that we lay that foundation. If you see the reasons given for the WA one, I don't give justification for it per se, but this is the reason that has been given, which is that the area in question made the whole environment nasty, nuisance, and rampant for other social vices, especially in the night. In other words, that land was not being used, and the place was being a haven for criminal activities, and therefore they allocated it to an investor, a Ghanaian investor, to put up a filling station there. That's the justification that was given for the grant of that land as far back as 2019, 2020. So that is that.
Okay, so on that specific issue, so the information is that the NDC government at the time withdrew the lease that they issued to Frames Oil in Cantonment, but when your government came, you constituted a committee.
It's the other way around. No, it's the other way around. It's rather the MPP government in 2017, when President Akufo-Addo came into office, the office of the president issued a directive that the lease be suspended or the lease be withdrawn. The lease was then withdrawn. The then Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Honorable Peter Amewu, constituted a committee to investigate these matters. When they investigated those matters, the committee presented its report to him, and the minister then restored that lease plus 7 other leases. So it's not the NDC government that withdrew the lease. It's the MPP government, on the contrary, that withdrew the
So you withdrew, constituted a committee, and okayed it?
He reviewed the committee, he reviewed but you see, it's important for us to pay attention to one thing. Omaro, we don't miss the issues. Land is sold when a lease is executed. When a lease is executed, the land is gone. The interest in the land is gone, and it's enforceable. So for all intents and purposes, the sale of the land in question took place 29 November 2016, after the elections, when the lease was executed. I'm with the greatest of respect, I'm a lawyer, and I've been Minister for Lands for this while. I'm not going to get myself, drawn into withdrawal of lease and that. When you execute a lease, you sold the land, you sold your interest in the land, and that's what happened in November 2016. And the withdrawal, the directive that was given for the withdrawal to be done, which culminated in an investigation by the minister and the subsequent restoration of the lease, amongst other leases. And even as we speak, this matter is still pending. As I say, the Chief Justice has issued a writ in respect of this matter, and the Chief Justice and I and the Attorney General have held several meetings to try and find a solution to this matter. So the point has to be made. How does this constitute President Akufo-Addo selling public lands to his cronies in pursuit of state capture? I mean, let's face it.
Okay.
Wild, very baseless, wild allegations.
Just to give you some more information, so the Honorable Ablakwa, on the Du Bois land, he says that it's a private entity known as W.E.B. Du Bois Museum Foundation Ghana LBG, with no track record, is the one that has been given the Du Bois Center on a lease for 50 years. So just by as you said, just by way of information.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can respond to that if you want. I was going to move on to a different subject. If you want to respond to this, you can.
But before you do, let me just say, you see from the beginning of my statement that I welcome scrutiny. I welcome us to the need for us to shed light on the manner in which public lands and natural resources of our country are managed. I welcome any information. If Honorable Ablakwa has any more information, should bring it. We'll put it to scrutiny. And we will inform the Ghanaian people accordingly. But the information I have from the records from the Lands Commission suggests that there's not been any transaction in respect of Du Bois. And if there was, I would put it out. I don't have a difficulty with that. And if there's a justification for it, I'll put the justification out. The jury will be out there to make a determination whether the justification is tenable or not.
The Judicial Service land, that one, it didn't happen under your tenure. The judges were told are in court. What is your position as a ministry on this? Are you with the judges or you are with the lessee?
I cannot be with the judges or be with the lessee. It's a matter that we have to find a solution to. Here you are, a lease has been given to a private company, a private entity. The person has acquired some legal rights. And then you have the interest of the judiciary, very legitimate interest of having a situation where they are accommodated properly. So as I say, the Chief Justice issued a writ The Chief Justice is at his instance. We've held a couple of meetings. We have actually constituted a technical committee to go into this matter. I've nominated a representative from my ministry. Attorney General has a representative. The judiciary has their representative. Let's wait for them to conclude on their matter. What I'm just trying to deal with now is that it is not correct. It is completely false. The allegation the honorable member of parliament is made. That is totally untrue.
Okay,
I think that my brother Okudzeto Ablakwa should just, if I were him, I would just say that on this occasion he probably was misinformed.
Very well. Two issues before you go. The Teshi firing range. There was information. In fact, I saw the former, I think, is it secretary to former President Mahama, Bendoche Malo, say that has been sold. I saw him write that on Facebook, that the Teshi firing range has been sold. And then there's a story here that the Osu Traditional Council is asking government to cease encroachment and the illicit sale of Osu stool lands to private developers. Can you respond to these two so we can call it a night?
No, we can. We can take a look at these things. That as you just with the Honorable Okudzeto allegation, never swallow these things.
Hello, Honorable. Hello. Apologies. We lost the Honorable Minister for Lands. He actually had told us before the interview that he was in motion. He was driving outside Accra, so the network may not have helped us. Do we have him? No, we've lost him. This is Eyewitness News on 97.3 City FM. We are coming to you from our studios in Adabraka in Accra.